reaching out to Kachin rebels to try to end one of Myanmar's bloodiest ethnic conflicts. An unprecedented escalation in fighting has shattered a 17-year truce. China is now trying to bring the warring sides together. Hello there, I'm Laura Kyle. Welcome to the programme. It's a battle Myanmar's ethnic Kachin rebels have been waging for more than half a century. A fight for greater autonomy from Myanmar's government. And those simmering tensions have reignited with devastating consequences. A long-standing ceasefire has broken down. Myanmar's military has unleashed fighter jets and helicopter gunships on Kachin rebel positions. The heavy fighting is raising doubts about President Thein Sein's ability to control the military at a time when the country is striding out along the road to democratic reform. Now, this is the focus of the fight. Northern Kachin state is right next door to China. And it's China which hosted the latest of a dozen rounds of talks here in the border town of Raili, where both sides agreed to continue dialogue. China is keen to see an end to the fighting along its border and avoid an influx of refugees. It also has major business interests in Myanmar. Well, let's bring in our guests today. In Bangkok, we have Phil Robertson, Deputy Director for Asia, Human Rights Watch. In London studios, Zoya Pan, Campaign Manager for Burma Campaign UK. And joining us from Beijing is Victor Gao, a member of the China-Myanmar Friendship Association. Thank you all very much for being here today. First, let's get an update on what we know about what's been happening in these talks. It seems there's been something of a positive outcome after, I believe, about 7 hours of discussions. Victor Gao, what can you tell us about who attended and what was discussed?
Well, first of all, this escalation of tension in the northern part of Myanmar is alarming, not only to those who care about Myanmar, but also to China in particular, because we border with Myanmar in that particular region. And China has been promoting calming down by all parties as much as we can. And not long ago, China sent Deputy Foreign Minister, Madame Fu Ying, to meet with the Myanmar's president and other Myanmarese leaders to urge for a ceasefire and the calming down of the situation. And more recently, talks were held through China's good offices between the warring parties. And I think both parties in Myanmar have indicated a willingness to bring this fighting to a stop and also make arrangement going forward for lasting stability. Now, give me 1 minute. Let me emphasize, maintaining peace and stability in Myanmar is crucially important to Myanmar at this stage, because Myanmar needs to dedicate itself to opening to the outside world and economic and political reform. If there is instability in Myanmar, it will really undercut any effort for major progress in Myanmar. Therefore, we urge all the parties involved in Myanmar to calm down and ceasefire and to building lasting peace.
We've seen some very fierce fighting between the two sides in recent weeks and months. How difficult was it to bring them to the negotiating table?
Well, I would say it is difficult, and on the Chinese side, bombshells have been fired into the Chinese side of the border, and also military planes, allegedly, according to different news reports, have also infringed upon the Chinese airspace. So, in a sense, this is a very serious situation as far as China is concerned. On the other hand, the Kachins, the minorities, Myanmar is famous for having many, many different minorities. Ethnic diversity is a dominant feature of the Myanmar situation. And many of those people living in the northern part of Myanmar are actually the same ethnic group people who also live in the Chinese side of the equation, principally in Yunnan province. And if the war breaks out, these people move back and forth along the border, so China will suffer a great deal. Therefore, there are fundamental, deeply rooted reasons for these situations, and I think both the Kachins and other minorities in the northern part of Myanmar and the federal government in Myanmar need to really adopt appropriate measure to engage each other, to talk it over and try to settle whatever differences they have for the overall benefit of the country and all the ethnic groups in Myanmar.
OK, well, we'll certainly return to look more at China's stake in Myanmar and reaching stability. For the moment, I just want to move over to Phil Robertson there in Bangkok. We're seeing from these talks, both sides agreeing at least to a de-escalation of military tensions. Are you confident that that's actually going to happen?
Well, obviously we hope so, but there's been many rounds of talks before this, and they have broken down, so we hope this time will be different. But I would say right now the importance of this is also it provides an opportunity for the international community, particularly international humanitarians, UN agencies, now to press forward to get assistance, humanitarian assistance in terms of food, medicine, shelter to all displaced persons in Kachin state. Over 100,000 people have been displaced, and a significant number of those are in Kachin Independence Army controlled areas, and they've been without aid for many months. And now the time is to get assistance to those people, and through that, in some way, try to secure this situation and stabilize it in the way that your other guest mentions.
Now, what is the government telling you about why it's blocking this humanitarian aid?
Well, the government has said that the aid is going to go to the Kachin rebels, and you know, I think that's an excuse that doesn't wash. We're talking about professional UN agencies who deliver humanitarian assistance in conflict situations all around the world. These are sophisticated agencies with the ability to tell the difference between combatants and civilians and to deliver aid in very difficult situations. It's been an excuse that the government has used to try to keep international observers out of areas where ongoing warfare has been taking place and where people have been internally displaced, and it really needs to stop.
Zoya Pan, this de-escalation that they hope is going to be brought to the area, I mean, how much faith do you have it? Because we've seen the government trying to impose a unilateral ceasefire before now, and yet we've seen troops on the ground continue their firing on the rebels. So do you think we're going to see an end to the fighting right now?
Well, you're absolutely right. While we welcome the talks, but actually this talk is about further talks. It's like for many years where the government in Burma has been using delay tactics. On the one hand, the government is talking about further talks about ceasefire. On the other hand, the government is increasing their military offensive against the Kachin Independence Organization. At the same time, their army is targeting civilians, which amount to the international crimes, including war crimes and crimes against humanity. So the problems with this talk is only talks about talks. We haven't seen concrete promise and actions taken by the government on the ground that they will actually stop the fighting. What the concern of the Kachin people have is that there will be more fighting, more military attacks, more human rights violations on the ground. But on the paper, the government has been talking about ceasefire. And while the government is having other ceasefire with other ethnic groups, they are not serious in this ceasefire. At the same time, they are not committing into political dialogue, which is political is the main problem in Burma. If the government is serious about bringing peace in the country, they should start serious ceasefire at the same time, and this ceasefire should lead to political dialogue. Having ceasefires without political solution is like pressing a pause button, not a stop button to the conflict.
OK. Just to help us understand a little bit about what the situation is there, because I know that you've had first-hand experience of such events. You yourself have been caught up in fighting by the Myanmar government, or back then the Burmese government, I believe. Tell us, what was it like?
Well, when I was 14, my village was attacked by the Burmese army, and it was more than 15 years ago. And it is so sad for me to see that this kind of attacks hasn't stopped, and it is still continuing, especially in Kachin area in the northern part of Burma, where the government broke a 17-year ceasefire with the Kachin Independence Army. And we, being under dictatorship and being attacked by the Burmese army, having fled for our lives, we know very well how difficult life it is for Kachin refugees who are hiding in the jungle or in crossing the border into China with very little hope. These people, they don't have any further hope. What they want is change. They want genuine peace in the country where they can grow up, especially for the children, and they can live like many other people in the country or in the world. But actually, for them, life is so difficult. These are the people who face the worst human rights violations and who face the worst humanitarian crisis without proper international humanitarian aid, because Thein continue to block aid in this Kachin independence organization's area. Therefore, it is very important that China, including other international community, put pressure on Thein government to stop blocking aid in this area, and then give them opportunity to build up their lives, and especially for the internally displaced people and for refugees to be able to go home and live in peace.
Okay. Victor Gao, I just want to pick up on a point there that Zoya made about how difficult life was for civilians. And I just want to touch on a point that China, back in August, sent some 4,000 civilians back from Yunnan province into the conflict zone. I just want to raise that point, to just ask why China did it, and isn't that in violation of international law?
Well, you may actually not know the reality on the ground in that particular part of the world. Actually, the border itself is very thinly guarded, and on any particular day, people on both sides of the border, both on the Myanmar side as well as on the Chinese side, because they belong to the same ethnic grouping more or less, they are not the Han Chinese. They are in China considered one or several of our minority nationalities, but they share a lot of common heritage with the minorities on the Myanmar side of the border. So they intermarry with each other, exchange goods, they cross the border to work here and there. So on any particular day, there is huge amount of an exchange of goods, services, and people along the border. Therefore, I think it will be absolutely normal for you to see Myanmar's people on their side of the border move into China on any particular day, or the Chinese people on our side of the border go back to the Myanmar side. Now, when the conflict escalates, that's the problem, because then you are talking about very extraordinary, unusual movement of the people. Refugees tend to flee into China, and normal business life will be disrupted on the Myanmar side of the border. That's the alarming development. I think we need to focus on these extraordinary events in order to really urge all the parties to calm down and come back to the negotiation table and talk about, building lasting peace in that particular part of Myanmar. Okay,
well, we will move on. And of course, part of understanding where we are today is understanding the events that have brought us to this point. And Kachin leaders have been pressing for an autonomous state since what was then Burma gained independence back in 1948. But it wasn't until 1961 that the Kachin Independence Army was formed, pledging to get a free Kachin Republic. And so the fighting began. A ceasefire was eventually agreed in 1994, which did hold for some 17 years. But that came to an abrupt halt in June 2011, in part when the Kachin refused to abandon a base near a hydropower plant which was being developed with China. Now, the government announced a unilateral ceasefire last month, but it broke down almost immediately, with the army capturing key outposts as it edged closer to Kachin rebel headquarters. Phil Robertson, that end of the ceasefire was caused in part by this Chinese hydropower plant in Kachin land, the Kachin feeling that they'd lost control of their resources. Should China feel a heightened sense of responsibility for this conflict?
Well, I think that China has a very big stake in what happens in Kachin State, not only for the issues of the economic development project, but also for the stability issues that Mr. Gao mentions. There is responsibility connected to some of these projects, but it's our feeling, frankly, that this has been an ongoing campaign by the Burma Army to essentially teach the Kachin a lesson here. We don't accept the idea that somehow there's a disconnect between the army commanders on the ground in Kachin State and President Thein Sein. President Thein Sein has said he's effectively ordered an end to an offensive. But, you know, the people that have, the troops that have moved in there, the movement of all these various different heavy munitions and jet planes and helicopters, all this was done by the Burma Army with the full knowledge of the government of Burma. There's a bit of a game being played here by the Burma government that somehow the army isn't quite under the control of the government. In fact, the army and the government are one, and the issue is, will the intervention of China enable some degree of constraint to be placed on the Burma Army's actions? We've seen again and again that the Burma Army operating on the ground is an abusive force that targets civilians. We've documented repeatedly attacks on civilians, capturing civilians and torturing them, sexual abuse by Burmese soldiers, and other abuses. And so far, no one has been held accountable for that. It's all well and good to talk about a ceasefire now, and obviously we hope it holds. But we also have to anticipate that if it doesn't, and a renewed offensive takes place, we could see tens of thousands of people streaming towards Burma, as Mr. Gao mentions. And at that point, China is going to have to live up to its obligations as a ratifying state of the Refugee Convention and provide temporary protection and not push people back as they did last year.
Zoya Pan, how accountable should the government be? Is it in a position to broker a lasting ceasefire? I mean, we're seeing the Kachin ethnic group being the last in the country to manage to reach some sort of deal. Why is it proving so difficult? Well,
because the government in Burma doesn't keep their promise in terms of having ceasefire. We have to remember here, the Kachin, they had ceasefire with the government in the past, and the ceasefire was about 17 years, and it was the government who broke this ceasefire. The Kachin was promised to have political dialogue within that period of the ceasefire, but they are denied this promise. The government broke the promise and then attacked the Kachin bases and targeting civilians. Without a proper political solutions, I don't think that the Kachin people will be able to see peace in the country. And for the Kachin, especially for the KIO, when they see when they talk with the government, for them the main aim is to have political solutions, which is autonomy for the Kachins and have a federal democratic state where everyone can enjoy equal rights. But for the government, whenever they have meeting with the Kachin leaders, they send their representative, which are not able to make decisions. We know that there has been many talks in the past years and in the past months, but whenever the Kachin Independence Organization bring up proposals about political solutions, the representative of the government always said, we can't make decision. We have to go back and discuss with Nebiro, with our authorities. So it is very clear that the government in Burma is playing delayed tactics, and they are not serious about bringing peace in the country. Their ultimate goal here is to crush the Kachin resistance group and to control their military power over the country.
Victor Gao, delay tactics, the government all about delay tactics. Do you believe that?
Let me just add another point onto our discussion. I think the situation in Myanmar has been very complicated in the recent few years. And if you listen very carefully to Hillary Clinton when she departed as the former Secretary of State of the United States, she seemed to consider Myanmar as a complete success story for the United States, and she considered that as one of her principal achievements. She even dared to say that one of the tasks for her successor would be to find another Myanmar. But when we look closely at the situation in Myanmar, not only there has been a recent conflict between the Myanmarese majority people versus the Muslim minority in the western part of Myanmar, but then this Kachin situation is another major flaring up. And I think the military government probably find it very difficult as to what exactly should be the direction for them to turn. And even though the other panelists just now mentioned the urgency of providing humanitarian assistance by the international organizations to the Kachin region, keep in mind that that Kachin region is highly inaccessible, geographically speaking, terrain-wise. It's very, very difficult to move into there. It's not a plain area. It's far away from major city regions, etc. So I would say we need to analyze the situation in Myanmar as a whole. And one point I want to emphasize is that foreign intervention in the domestic situation in Myanmar is actually counterproductive, because there will be people outside of Myanmar who want to disturb situation in Myanmar, who may want to even disrupt the normal process over there, but they will have nothing to lose. Eventually, it will be the people in Myanmar who will suffer. If there will be escalation, it will be the Kachin minorities who will suffer.
I mean, China does have a lot of foreign interests in Myanmar itself. I just have one last question I want to put to Phil Robertson. Victor Gao did bring up the international community there. It has been pretty crucial lately in Myanmar and its development, hearing a lot of praise from the US, the UK, the whole EU about Myanmar's reforms. Has that been premature?
Well, I think certainly Hillary Clinton's declaration of success is premature. There's still many agenda items related to human rights in Burma that remain uncompleted. I mean, there's still hundreds of political prisoners in Burma's prisons, a slew of repressive laws that are on the books that have been used to violate rights for the past several decades. The situation in Arakan state, which is very dire and getting worse, and the fact that many Rohingya are leaving the country in rickety boats indicates the dire situation there. And also the fact that in addition to Kachin state, many of the other ethnic groups have concluded ceasefires, but they haven't moved the next step towards some sort of larger sustainable peace that includes political issues, for instance, autonomy, devolution of power, local control of things like schools or other facilities of local government that the minorities feel is very important for them to have a say in. We haven't really moved very far from the situation of ceasefires that have prevailed over a number of years towards a more sustainable peace between the Burman majority and the ethnic minorities.
And there I'm afraid we will have to leave it. Joining us today are guests in Bangkok, Phil Robertson in London, Zoya Pan and in Beijing, Victor Gao. Thanks very much to you all, and thanks very much to you too for watching this edition of Inside Story. You can find this programme and many more at aljazeera.com. Just follow the links, and you can also leave us your comments. Bye for now.